Have you ever interviewed somebody and went on to hire them only to find out weeks later that they were not the right person for the job? If that is you, or you are going to be interviewing anytime soon, this podcast is one you are not going to want to miss. I am Melissa Franks. I am your on-call COO. And here on the Opt-in podcast, we talk about everything, what it takes to thrive in business, not just survive. And today we are talking about the one thing that gets your attention the most on YouTube and social media, and that is interviewing. And what is really, really interesting about this topic is you can find top 25 questions to ask in an interview. You can find things to look for on a resume. You can find training on how to become a better interviewer. All of those things are readily available. And yet, small business owners specifically, or those that are new to a managerial role, continue to be challenged with how to conduct an interview that results in you having the right candidate and the right employee for the long haul. Over and over and over again, I get comments on YouTube videos, I get DMs that are saying, I get it, I understand what you're saying, and I try to do what you do, and what still ends up happening is the person comes in and they're the wrong fit, they're the wrong cultural fit, they don't have the right skill sets. I even had somebody tell me, like, I was completely fooled. Somebody DM'd me and they knew that we were looking to hire a specific role, and so they gave me their credentials and they came from a reputable source and they talked a good talk, and then they got into the business, and within just weeks, the entire team, let alone the business owner, came forward and said, like, hey, this person is not who they said they were. They have misrepresented their abilities and their skills. And then all of a sudden you have a decision to make. Do you let the employee go, or do you keep them and try to train them up? And I am here to tell you right now, unless you are a big corporation that has deep pockets and a lot of capacity in your team, when you get somebody in your team and within days or weeks, you know they're not the right fit, they don't have the right skill set, the best thing that you can do, the kindest thing that you can do is cut them loose. So what we're going to talk about today is tactics that you can employ during an interview that will help you better identify if the person sitting across from you or screen to screen from you is really who they say they are, and if they're going to be the right fit in the long term for your business. Now, I'm sure many of you are saying, well, if we're not going to talk about questions, like, I don't really know how this is going to help. I get it. So for many, many years, I had a very strong belief that it was the science of the questions that would uncover whether the person is right fit or not. And let me tell you a story. So before I started my corporate career, I worked in retail, like brick and mortar retail, for about 6 years. And the last 2.5 years of that stint of my career path while I was in college, I was accountable on a team for opening over 22 physical store locations and staffing each of those locations with anywhere from 50 to 100 people. So just do the math. If I was staffing 22 locations with 100 people each, that was 220 people that we had to hire. 220. And what that meant is that we kissed a whole bunch of frogs before we found the prince, if you know what I'm saying. So probably over the course of an 18-month period, to be honest, I probably interviewed 1,000 people. And this, I got to keep this honest with you, this was like in-person situations here. This was group interviews. This was, we'd bring 10 people in at a time, and like I had to make a decision before they walked out of the door. And during that point in my career, the best thing I had was repetition. I had the exact same questions over and over and over again. And as I went through the process, what I was able to start identifying was based on what was being communicated, based on how it was being communicated, and based on the interaction that we were actually having, the emotional connection, the tone of voice, the body language, I was able to predict with a significant amount of accuracy, and I wish we had tracked the data, if the person that we hired was going to stay with us over a year, if the person that we hired was going to be somebody that we could move up into management in the future, or if the person that we were hiring was literally like, I need a body on the floor to make sure people don't steal stuff because we're sharing a wall with Tijuana, no joke, and that person's going to do, and we won't have them for longer than 6 weeks. I was able to assess all of those things because I went through thousands of interviews in a very short period of time. And what I didn't realize until significantly later is this is a skill I acquired in my late teens and early 20s, to be very candid. What I didn't realize until many, many years later, probably a decade or more, when I was managing managers, was that I was so good at interviewing because I had developed the ability to read the room. It had nothing to do with the questions I asked. I was teaching my managers how to interview, and they were using my tried and true list of questions because I was like, these questions, I have honed and refined them, and they give you the dirt, they give you the tea, you figure it out. Like, it provides clarity. And what kept happening, and not all of the time, but probably 1 in every 10 or so that we would hire, we got somebody that was really not a good fit. They should have been screened out. We should have caught it in the interview. And I couldn't figure out what the problem was until I joined an interview with one of my hiring managers, and what I realized was they were so focused on the questions and answers. So I asked a question, they gave me the answer. Did it check the box? Literally, that they weren't paying attention to the answer that they were getting. They weren't paying attention to how it was delivered. They weren't paying attention to the words that were being used and the body language. And so today we're going to talk about what I learned, the muscle that I built in my late teens, early 20s, interviewing 1,000 plus people, and why this is something that you can learn right now, that you can begin to do right now if you are interviewing people, and it doesn't require anything more than being observant. We are not going to talk today about questions to ask. We're going to talk all about the actual process of the interview itself. Now, the cool thing about this is, and we'll talk about this at the end of the podcast, you can actually test this. You can test it on your kids, you can test it on your partner, you can test it on your family members. You can actually take what I'm going to be talking to you today about, and you can take it into the wild and ask an open-ended question and then just like pay attention. So you don't need to wait until you've had 1,000 people to interview before you can say, oh, I finally figured it out. I've cracked the nut. I'm good at this. Just go to the barbecue. Just go to the kids' sport event and like try this out. And I guarantee you, once you see it, you can't unsee it. It's like one of those situations. So I'm going to talk us through 5 warning signs, and I'm going to explain exactly what you're going to want to be looking for when you are conducting the interview. So the very first warning sign is that they talk about themselves. Now, are you already thinking this lady's crazy because they're interviewing for a job, so aren't they supposed to be talking about themselves? Heck yeah, but not in the way that you think. So what they should be doing when you ask a question and you say, tell me a time where you solved this sort of a problem, or tell me a time when you delivered these sorts of results, right? We ask all these questions. We know what they are. They're industry specific, they're business specific, they're like whatever. We know that they're going to respond to us with an example. We know that they're going to give potentially a story, or they're going to describe a scenario and an outcome. Now, there is the preferred way to do it and the not preferred way to do it. So let's talk about what's most common, which is somebody sits down and they give you an example or they tell you a story and they say, I. First I did this, then I did this, then that happened, then I delivered these results. Okay? Great. You've been able to identify that the thing you were actually asking them about, they have some understanding of and some competency of, or they don't, because they may have answered and you're like, well, yeah, that was not what I asked. And interesting, you can do that, but also not helpful. What it also tells you though, and this is why it's so important, is that when you ask these questions for them to demonstrate their expertise, while they must demonstrate expertise because that's what they've asked you for, what is critical, and this tells you when they have mastery, is that they articulate to you why that's so important and is going to be helpful to you in the long run. They're going to talk to you about the benefits. So they're going to say, there was this massive problem and our website went down, and what we ended up figuring out was that the way that it was built, there was one piece of code that was just wrong. And as soon as we fixed it, everything came back up. And in order to make sure that that didn't happen again, we implemented code reviews, right? What you want them to say to you is, and what that did is it provided the business owner peace of mind that the website was going to be stable and go down. What it allowed us to do was make more frequent changes because we had a process in place where we knew we weren't going to risk taking the website down. What it allowed us, that person's going to start telling you very specifically what the long-term benefits were of them identifying a problem, taking an action, and delivering results. While the process is important, you want to verify that they have the skill set and the expertise to do the thing that you're asking about. What's more important is that they understand why they're doing it, why it's important to the business that they have the ability to do those things. They understand how it connects back to the big picture. They understand why when they implemented this small change in the process, it didn't slow anything down. The business was actually able to move faster in the long run because there was certainty about how to make those changes. So when you ask them questions, you want to pay attention to what they're actually focused on. Where are they spending the most time talking? Are they spending the most time talking about how wonderful they are, how smart they are, and how they built this tool and how they saved the day? Or are they spending more time talking about why there was such an upside for the business, how it helped the business owner or other team members or the business at large move the needle forward? The candidates that you want are focused on the positive impact of the example or story that they've provided to you. Their role, their achievements are really second to what the actual outcome and long-range impact was. Now, this is really, really, really easy for you to test. Really easy. So when you ask this question, whatever it is in your world, you're going to have a part B, and that's going to be, what was the benefit to the business? That's it. And if you don't have to ask that question because it was answered when they were talking to you, you know they passed that gate. They passed that test. Now, if you have to answer the question, it's you giving them a second try, right? Let's see. But if they can't answer that question, if they go back to talking about themselves and how they were able to continue to save the day in other ways, red flag. Big, big red flag. The second red flag is that they do not mention prior teams, people, mentors, or teammates unless you ask. Every single person, unless they are starting their own business and they're employee number one, is going to need to be interacting with other people. In fact, that employee number one is going to need to be interacting with other people, but that is not the topic of today. Every single person that is interviewing for a job is going to need to interact with other people. And you can come right out and ask them. You can ask them for examples of how they worked on teams. You can ask them about examples of how teamwork didn't go really well. You can ask them all sorts of things, right? What is actually more telling, what you want them to be able to demonstrate through the hour, the 90 minutes, the whatever you have with them, is the importance of the team to what they do. What you're testing for is the person in front of you a lone wolf or a team player? Now, sometimes a lone wolf is a good thing. So their answer to this question, or the way that you test for this, because this isn't a question, could be a yellow light. It could be, that function kind of sits off to the side and it's a fractional CFO, let's say, I'm making this up, and they don't really need to talk to anybody. Like, they're not on projects. They don't need to do anything. So do I love that they weren't really talking about other people? No. But is that going to be a problem? Not as big of a one as not. Now, if you were interviewing somebody and they need to interact with everybody, it's somebody in your operations team or somebody in your creative team, and they need to interact with all the people, you included. What you want to hear throughout the conversation that you're having, also known as an interview, is how they work with others, how they give praise, how they are humble, how they integrate the team dynamic into the storytelling and examples that they give. If you have somebody that's sitting in front of you and does not at any given point say, at some point in my career, I was told to do this, or I was told to do that, or in my last team, this is how we structured the work, or I'm really good at this, and previously my skills were complemented with somebody that could do that, a red flag goes up. And now you're going to ask the question. You're going to ask them, how they work in teams. You might ask them what role they normally play in a team. You're going to ask them to give you a real example of how their function would have to work with somebody else. You're going to ask questions. You absolutely are going to be doing that. And so it will give them the opportunity to talk about how they interact with others. But this one specifically is they should be coming up with it on their own. If the team dynamic in your business is really important, if the team dynamic in your department is really, really important, if the culture of the organization is really important, if you don't bring people in very often, what you have to spend time doing is listening to them. Yes, they can have the expertise. Yes, they can have the skills. Yes, they can have the time and chair. If they spend the entire time talking about themselves and don't give anybody any credit, they don't inquire about the team dynamic. That can also be one thing where they ask you specifically, how is the team structured? How do they work together? How do we communicate? If they don't ask how decisions are made or problems are solved, this is all indicators that they operate alone and they're super comfortable operating alone, and maybe that's even preferred. And so that's something that you have to dive into and test. And again, this is something observed over the conversation. You can't determine if there's a red flag 5 minutes in unless they come right out and tell you, I don't like working with people. I like working by myself. Leave me alone. I've had a few of those people in my lifetime. But what you really, really want to do is listen to how they talk about the people that they have worked with in the past. And the reason that you want this to be organic, the reason that you don't want to have to kind of trigger this part of the interview process and fact-finding mission is because you want to see if they naturally demonstrate leadership. You want to see if they naturally demonstrate that they understand being on a team means that sometimes they take a secondary role to somebody else being a leader. You want to see that they enjoy interacting with people that have other skill sets and expertise because they see it as a learning opportunity. These are all things that you want to be able to observe and see because they bring it forward to you. This is where humility comes into play. If in every single story where there's reference of a team, they're the ones that are saving the day, that might not work in your culture. Now, maybe you do need somebody. Maybe you have a team composition set up somewhere that they need somebody to bring leadership in. Maybe they need somebody to help kind of steer the ship in the right direction because right now that's you and you need somebody else to do it. That's cool. But what you want to hear is how they talk about being a leader in the team and how they build up the strengths of other people and how all of that works. What you want to pick up is the essence of what they perceive being on a team to be, of what their role is in the team and whether they value teamwork or not. The next red flag is talking negatively about anything. What's even worse, which is even a bigger red flag, which I'm guessing you would probably know that if you were doing any sort of interviewing, is if they're talking negatively about their prior boss or the prior business owner or the prior teammates. You're not friends. You're not having a session where you're just bashing other people. You're not kind of gossiping behind the scenes. That's not the point of this conversation. They could also be talking negatively about other companies. If you bring in somebody from marketing and you ask what their point of view is on a competitor's marketing strategy, what you're going to want to hear is a really balanced response. They may believe that it's misguided. Maybe that even aligns with your point of view. You are going to want to hear what positives they find. So as soon as you hear any sort of negative talk about anybody or anything, this should be sending warning bells off in your head. The flag should be up. You should be on the lookout for what's going on, and you should be digging deeper, because somebody that leads with negativity, even if they're on their best behavior, you've got to remember people are in their interviews and they are on their best freaking behavior. They know, I got to hit it. I got to knock it out of the park. I got to be good. I have to sell them on me so I get hired, right? So even if there's just one moment where they're negative, you have to jump on that. You have to dig in a little bit and see if that was just an outlier, or if really they've got some pessimism in there. And you've got to determine if that's a good fit for your team, because what I can tell you right now is if you bring somebody in that is a negative Nelly into a high-performing team, it's going to tank the team. Now, this one is the absolute trickiest one, because like I said, people come into this interview setting with the intentions of performing. An interview is a performance. It can be a genuine performance. It can be a heartfelt performance, but at the end of the day, it's a performance. You practice, you prepare, it's a thing. You're on stage in a nutshell. I coach people to a certain extent that they are on stage. You've got to put your best foot forward. So they're going to be very careful about this because they know they're not supposed to be negative. But what you want to be able to see, when this works well, is you want to see that the person is able to take accountability. You want to see that if there is a criticism, there is a counter assessment. So if they're talking, we go back to the marketing example, about that competitor and saying, I just really think that that's tone deaf based on their target market. I really, really do. And here's why. Let me give you the assessment. This is their target market. Their target market is Gen Z, and their marketing an opportunity to get back into the office, things to do when you're physically in your office, and Gen Z doesn't want to be there. In fact, Gen Z's rioting against that, or they're marketing the 6-day work week, and Gen Z really only wants a 4-day work week, but they start to explain to you that here's why I think it's off the mark. It's off the mark for this reason. Here's what I would do differently. Here's where they can salvage it. Here's where they should pivot. If you get a criticism in any sort of form from the person that you were interviewing, what you're looking for is that they take accountability in turning the ship around, and whatever that is. And it's just in the way that they're communicating. Now, they may give an example of, you may ask them to talk about how they resolve conflict in the workplace, and that is a pitfall. That's where it gets really, really difficult, because you trigger an emotion. They're like, oh gosh, I remember when I had to work with that person that I could not stand, and we were constantly at each other's throats. And you'll see some negativity come through because they've got emotion tied to that question. And what you want to test for in that regard is that they take accountability. So even if they say, I worked with this person, they were really, really difficult. It was, political and a competition, and they tried to undermine me. What you want to hear them turn around and say is, and so what I did is I sat down with them and tried to work it out. What I did is I talked to my manager, and we found me work to do in another place. What I did was ask them for feedback of how I behave so that maybe we can improve the relationship. Whatever it is, if they are talking about somebody else, what you want to hear from them is what they did to improve the situation. So while that could start from a negative place, it comes out the other side in a solution-based place. If all they're doing is talking negatively without any solutions, red flag, raise your hands, ask more questions. You may have just unlocked something that could have completely tanked your business by paying attention to how they're phrasing things. And this is so pervasive because, like I said, they're performing. So you've got to really listen to word choice. You've really got to dial in. And the easiest way when you hear something that's like, that was kind of funky, is you just have to say, tell me more. Tell me more about that. And then wait and give them room. They'll show you. They will show you. All right. The next one, the next red flag is that they are not prepared. They are not prepared. I'm going to tell y'all this right now. Anybody that is interviewing with you, unless you have been a confidential company and they actually don't know who you are, which is very rare. It happens in the startup world a lot, or private equity world a lot. But generally, for all of y'all, they know who they applied to and they know who they're interviewing with. They should do their research and diligence. They get to use Google. They get to go on your social channels. They get to go on LinkedIn. They get to talk to friends or coworkers that have worked with you in the past. In this world, in 2024, it is impossible for your business to live under a rock. It's just not possible. Everything has a digital footprint. Everything. And if you have somebody walking into the interview with you and they do not come in with a fact basis that is generally available to the public, it is a no-go. Don't end the interview. End the interview. Do not spend your time on it. Say, thank you so much. I appreciate that you're here. And one of the specific requirements that we have is that you understand as much as you can about us before you get here. Now, do they need to go pull the last 10 years of financial records from the board meetings and be in depth in that? No, unless they're the CFO and that's germane to what they're doing. But what they do need is they need to understand the business through the lens of what they're interviewing for. If they're a marketing candidate or a creative director or somebody on the creative team, you're going to want them to have combed the world to see past and present marketing. And you're going to want them to have a perspective on it. And you're going to want them to understand the products that are available, products that were available prior. You're going to want them to have a perspective on your target market. You're going to want them to understand the competitor landscape. You want them to do their research and come in prepared to answer questions and have a conversation with you through the lens of being informed. And if they are not informed, it is a no freaking go. It is really interesting because I have a strong point of view that you can pivot industries however you want. I am a strong demonstration of that. If you have a skill set basis, you can move around because that skill set never leaves you. With that said, if somebody is interviewing for your business or your team and it's a different industry than the one that they have been working in forever, it is a must. It is a deal breaker that they understand the industry for which your business sits. Even if they have never worked there, they have watched YouTube videos, they have talked to people, they have read articles, they have looked at the news, they have seen what the trends are. They should be coming forward with a fact basis and an understanding of the industry that you're in, the challenges you're facing, the big players that are there, and how you fit in. They have to do their research. And if they have not done their research, if they have not done it, politely decline a further conversation. I am telling you right now, because what this tells you is that they don't do research on anything. This tells you that a problem presents itself in front of them and they just solve it in the fastest way possible. They don't know if it's a symptom or a root cause. They just figure it out. This means they're going to be lazy with how they're running your business. This tells you that they are going to not take time to be considerate. They're not going to work with other team members and understand where they're coming from when they're trying to resolve conflict. They're not going to look at the bigger picture and say, does this make sense? When somebody doesn't do their research to get in the door, I guarantee you they're not going to be doing their research when they're sitting down at your dining room table. I guarantee it. Now, the last red flag, the last one is that they don't ask for clarification. This one is different than asking questions. Everybody's going to come into your interview with like the 3 questions that they want to ask you about the business, about the role, about the people, the whatever. Like, we have coached people that are interviewing enough that they know that they have to come in the door with some questions to ask. And they're all relatively the same. You can kind of predict what they are. This red flag is different. What I am saying is that specifically, when a candidate does not ask for clarification on anything that you have asked, anything that you have said, it means that they are a person that makes assumptions. It means that they are somebody that does not investigate. Think about that for a second. If you ask a question that you know is vague and can be answered in like 75 different ways, and they don't ask you a follow-up question just to make sure they give you what you need, they're assuming they understand you already. And so what happens when you give them an assignment at work that's not super clear? They're not going to ask you for clarification. They're just going to run off and do. And you know what is dangerous about the running off and doing without getting clarification, without being super specific, without getting things aligned, is that they're going to end up somewhere that you did not intend. Sometimes that might be good. Generally, though, it's bad. You want to find people, regardless of the role that they are interviewing, that are inquisitive and that are curious and that demonstrate that they can do some investigation. Now, is everybody waking up and saying, I want to know all of the things. The world is my oyster and I have so many questions and I just want to sit here and talk to you forever? No. But you can build into the conversation, and naturally it happens because we're humans and you have never met before, and the way that you talk and question is different than the way that they talk and answer, is you build in something that's vague on purpose and see what they do. It gives you an opportunity to evaluate them live and in color. What do they do when they don't have all the information? What do they do when directions are unclear? What do they do when there isn't a manual to follow to get it done? And if they're not asking for clarification, if they're not asking for course correction, if they're not asking for feedback, they're not doing any of those things in the interview, they're not going to do it when they're working for you. Because they're on their best behavior in the interview. Remember that. They're on their best behavior. So what happens in real life when they're working for you, they got the job, they're in the door, is less than the best behavior. And if the best behavior is showing you that they do not ask for clarification, they make a ton of assumptions, they do not investigate things, guess what's going to happen when they're in the door? You're just going to see that tenfold. And if you are a small business or you are a small team, you need people that take initiative. You need people that come back and double check. You need people that allow for checks and balances in the business at every level and in every role. Now, do they have to be private investigator level? No. Should they ask one follow-up question if you ask them something vague? Yes. Or if you ask them a question, you ask them 4 questions all together and they don't know where to go? Yes, they should ask a follow-up. There are a million red flags that you can be on the look for. These are just 5. They're just 5, but I have one bonus one for you that I want you to consider before we end today. And the bonus one is that they do not name drop. Now, name dropping, generally speaking, is not good, right? I think that we all correlate it to somebody saying, you know, I was on a plane with Taylor Swift, or like that would ever happen. I was on a plane with so-and-so, or I know Justin Bieber's mom's third cousin, twice removed's younger daughter, right? We all know that that's annoying. So what I mean by name dropping, when I talk about name dropping, is that as you're having a conversation, they should be saying, I observed business X doing this, or I had a colleague that worked over at Business Y, or when I worked at Business Z with so-and-so and so-and-so, or whatever. They should be using names of individuals and businesses that are well respected and known in your industry to demonstrate that they're the right fit. They should be doing that in stories and examples. They should be doing that when you ask about their competency. They should be able to talk to you about mentors that they had. Now, do all of these need to be household names? No. Do you need to know all of them? No. But you should be hearing them reference experts. You should be hearing them reference competitors. You should be hearing them reference other things. Now, people that don't name drop, it means that they don't have a network. It means that when they get into a pickle and you don't have somebody in your team that knows the answer, they don't have a friend to phone. A really good example of this is that really small businesses, everybody's figuring out everything all of the time. You can all have core competencies, absolutely, and you can have expertise from other places, and you're still figuring it out as you go. And the best thing that you can do is when you hire somebody, they know somebody else that's been there and done it, or something similar. This is an example I'm going to give you. So, a while ago, I was working with somebody, and they wanted to make some changes in their marketing because they didn't think that the marketing was working. And I'm not a marketing expert. I'm an operations person. I know enough about marketing to be dangerous. What I do know, though, is I know a bunch of good people in the marketing space. And so I asked a significant amount of questions, and what I identified was actually needed 3 people. Yeah, 3. They wanted to redo their brand, so they wanted a branding person. They wanted that branding to be reflected in their social media. They needed support doing the social media, which is social media management is completely different than brand marketing. And then the third thing was that they wanted to start running paid ads. They had done it in the past and they weren't successful. And when I say paid ads, they wanted to run Google ads, they wanted to run ads on Meta, and they were considering LinkedIn ads. And through our course of our discussion, I said, well, to be honest with you, generally speaking, you've got people that understand how to run ads in the Meta landscape and ads in LinkedIn and ads in Google. You're not going to find a one-size-fits-all unless you go to a big agency. And so we kind of talked through exactly what they needed. And I was able to connect them to all of these various peoples, not because I'm a marketing expert, but because I've built a healthy network out there in the interwebs and could say, this person's super reputable and has worked with businesses like you. Here, go talk to these 3 people and see which one's the right fit for you. Here, go talk to this one and go do this. And so I didn't actually help them at all. They didn't need me in their business at that moment. What they did need was a whole bunch of other people who I knew and could verify their competency and experience. And that's what you want coming in your door. You want somebody that knows people and speaks well of them. And you want somebody that knows other businesses that you could call and ask for advice, or you could do partnerships with, or you could whatever. That when they don't name drop, when they don't talk about their network or their connections, it means that they're operating in a vacuum, in a silo, and there isn't going to be a greater benefit to your business by having them there. In fact, it could be a hindrance, because if they really do need to phone a friend, they don't have a friend to phone. Or they'll phone somebody and it may not be the right somebody, but they don't know because they don't have a depth of their network. So you want to pay special attention to how they talk about their connections and how they talk about the relationships that they build and how they talk about past coworkers, because that's all going to tell you the value that they're going to bring to you. That has nothing to do with the expertise that you're hiring for. It's also going to tell you who they associate with, who they look up to. And you've got to make all of those tests. Like if they have a role model of a billionaire who spends their entire time on the internet swearing, and your business is at the polar opposite of that from a brand standpoint, you might take pause. Now, that billionaire may be super smart. They're a billionaire, right? But if the messaging and like the approach and the aggressiveness that's happening from the billionaire is not aligned to your business, this person may not be the right fit. So the name dropping is important because it helps tell you whose voice and opinion they value, who they're connected to, what help they can get to bring into your business, and also talks a little bit about the level of expertise. It's another way to really verify that what they're saying to you, they have the ability to do and they know. So there is your bonus. So you really got 6, not 5. How about that? So like I said, there is the list of questions that you can ask in the interview. You can get all those out on the internet. We've done a few of these podcasts around this too. This specifically, the things to observe and the connections to draw based on what you're being told and the words that are being used in the interview is going to make the difference between you hiring somebody you think is the right fit and hiring somebody you know is the right fit. I hope this podcast was helpful for you today. If you know anybody that is interviewing for a job or hiring people, share this with them. Share it with them. Based on the volume of questions that I receive and frankly content that's out there in the world, I know that this is a pain point. So please share this with your world. And until we talk next time, friends, please know you are wise, you are strong, and you are capable, and I believe in you.